After what feels like the longest period of reflection in politics, Joe Biden is expected to announce this Wednesday that he's running for president. And according to the Real Clear Politics average of recent polls, he's expected to enter the field as the frontrunner, ahead of the three other white guys who are currently polling in the top five. Here to talk about how the Democratic field is shaking up is New York Times op-ed columnist and MSNBC political analyst Michelle Goldberg, and Democratic pollster Cornell Belcher, who's also an MSNBC analyst. Thank you both for being here. Michelle, I'm going to start with you first, because there is a thing that's happening where the women are coming hard. Like, you know, Senator Elizabeth Warren just came out and said impeachment. She's throwing out like a truckload of policy every day. Senator Kamala Harris is a prosecutor who's in the perfect position to kind of comment on the present era with Trump. But it's just the white dudes who are sort of making it big. And then Biden's going to come in and be number one.
And I think it's a combination of sexism and fear of sexism, right? Because there's people who kind of just are going to overlook certain candidates because they're women. And then there's other people who look at what happened to Hillary Clinton, believe, as I believe, actually, that you know, sexism played a role in her defeat, and then ask themselves, do we really want to take that risk again, right? And so I think that Democrats are really, really concerned about electability. I actually don't think that Joe Biden is that electable, and I don't think either party has a great record when they sort of settle on the consensus candidate that nobody's super excited about. But I understand why people think that he's the safest choice, given that defeating Trump is such an imperative.
Well, and let's ask you, Cornell, is there data to back up people's fears? Because I can tell you anecdotally, when I ask people who they think should be the nominee, almost to a person, they say Biden because they feel safe with him. Is there data to back up their sense that he is the safe guy?
Well, a couple things. One is, listen, there is sexism that plays a role in politics, as well as racism and other biases. But to understand that why Biden enters this race as a front runner has everything to do with familiarity. You know, Biden in a YouGov poll out a couple weeks ago, it showed, you know, Biden has 70% favorables among Democrats. He's someone that they know and they're comfortable with. And Biden's very favorable right now is 36 among Democrats. You know, Booker's 36% of Democratic voters in that same poll don't know enough about Cory Booker to rate him. So Biden being a well-known quantity here at this time is very much has everything to do with how he enters the race as a front runner. And I will also point out to you, Joy, that being a front runner at this time in the Democratic primary is actually the kiss of death. Because if you look at, you know, I think this race is a lot more like 2004 than it was in anything else. And if you look at this time, at that period of time, Lieberman was a front runner, and then Gephardt for a while became front runner as well. So these early polls don't put too much weight on these early polls.
Yeah, that's a good point. It is still early. And, you know, the other thing that's strange that's going on, Michelle, is that there's a sense that a lot of the candidates are trying to find a general election positioning that somehow will get them to win the primary, meaning you've got Bernie Sanders, who this new poll that has him in, I believe, first place as the first poll that he is first, and I think Biden is second. 26% of Bernie Sanders voters said they would rather vote for Donald Trump over Elizabeth Warren. You have a substantial percentage of his supporters who are independents. You have a lot of this kind of positioning saying, I can win, you know, the voters in Indiana or the voters in Kansas, when they haven't yet won the voters in New Hampshire, in Iowa and South Carolina.
Well, right, but that's the pitch, right? I mean, the pitch that people want to hear above all is, you know, yes, I will accomplish all of these things that are part of the Democratic platform, but I can beat Trump, right? I mean, that's the sort of, you know, that's the kind of top line message for a lot of these people. I think that we should look back at recent Republican elections. I mean, on paper, you would assume that both Mitt Romney and John McCain were far more electable candidates than Donald Trump, but you need to thrill your own base.
Right.
And don't get me wrong, I admit that Joe Biden has a base, Bernie certainly has a base, but I feel like the most important thing is that voters not sort of try to outsmart themselves or not second guess themselves, right? I mean, you kind of go with who you're passionate about and build from there.
And then, Cornell, the other question is about who's your base, right? Because there doesn't seem to be a lot of concern at present that potentially African-American voters might not be enthused, that the assumption is they'll just come along with whoever it is, and the imperative is to get really white voters enthusiastic.
Well, let's just say this: the candidate who's thinking that way and that campaign is thinking that way. One, I don't think they're going to win. I don't think they can be the Democratic nominee. And two, they sure as heck won't beat Donald Trump in a general election because one of the things that we've talked about, I think, before, Joy, is how pivotal South Carolina plays and how pivotal Nevada plays. So voters of color will be instrumental in determining who the candidate for the Democratic nomination will be, and if that person is ignoring the African American or the Hispanic vote, that person will not be our nominee.
It's going to be tough. Michelle Goldberg, Cornell Belcher, thank you both.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.